What's up, everybody? My name is Mr. McFisticuff, and welcome to a deck tech on a very interesting commander that I don't think many people have seen before. This is Hama Pashar Ruin Seeker. It's an Azorius commander that aims to go through dungeons infinitely to close out the game using creature-based flicker combos. The deck tends to turn the corners around in turns 6, 7, or 8, and the best part about this deck is its price. It's only about 50 bucks, which is very intentional. It's about the cost of a pre-con at a big box store, though is notably much, much stronger. So the deck list will be in the description below. I'll go over it in brief, and then we'll follow that up with a bit of combo tutorial about how some of these combos work, because it's not very straightforward, and it can be. So let's start off by reading Hama Pashar herself. Hama Pashar, Runeseeker, is 1 white and a blue for a 2/3 legendary creature human wizard, which reads room abilities of dungeons you own trigger an additional time. Primarily, the dungeon we want to use is the Undercity dungeon from taking the initiative. A lot of our permanents cause us to take the initiative or venture into dungeons. We usually want to start with the initiative, ideally, and then use our other dungeon venturing triggers to just keep going through the Undercity as much as possible. Though there are times where we'll want to go through, say, the Lost Mines of Pendelver to get some treasures, to hold up interaction and things like that, or maybe we don't have a choice, just the way the triggers are ordered on the stack. But let's jump into the Undercity so you get a sense of what the game plan is. So we'll go into the Undercity. We have to start in the secret entrance, where we'll get some basic lands into our hand, helps us hit our land drops. The Lost Well helps us scry, and notably we're doing all these triggers twice with Hama in play. So we'll scry 2 twice, we'll get basic lands twice, we'll create treasure tokens twice by going to the stash, we'll go into the catacombs, we'll make 4/1 black skeleton creature tokens with menace, which are good blockers and also help us hit our opponents to take the initiative back if we somehow don't have it. But the Throne of Dead 3 is where things get really spicy. So we reveal the top 10 cards of our library to put a creature among those onto the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it. It gains hexproof until our next turn, and then we shuffle. Getting this twice gives us amazing card selection, helps us hit our combo pieces very consistently, and really helps us close out the game very fast. That round of hexproof really matters for in certain instances, because some of our cards without this can be risky, like Abdul Adrian. And notably, these cards coming into play are not being cast. It's very hard to interact with the Undercity. These cards are just coming into play. Their abilities still trigger, but they can't be countered. So speaking of creatures, we're running 29 of them. This is a pretty good count, as far as consistency goes for hitting our creatures off of the Throne of the Dead 3. A lot of our creatures are here to venture into dungeons, facilitate that, or they're here for utility, to draw us cards, flicker our stuff, or they're combo outlets in their own right. Brago is probably who you think of when you think of Azorius flicker decks. He slots very well into the 99 here. Abdul Adrian is one of our biggest combo outlets in the deck. It facilitates a lot of what we do. You can exile any number of non-land permanents you control until he leaves the battlefield and create soldier tokens, and then they all will come back when he leaves the battlefield. So notably, if you say exile Felidar Guardian under him and then flicker him, and you organize the triggers for Abdul Adrian to exile the Felidar Guardian, have the Felidar Guardian trigger after targeting Abdul Adrian, you'll exile Abdul again, and then you'll flicker everything, causing loops, where you flicker everything that's exiled under Abdul Adrian. Archaeomancer and Feywild Caretaker, and Peregrine Drake. Archaeomancer and Peregrine Drake are useful in their own right in this list, though notably they combo with Ghostly Flicker, you generate infinite mana, and then Flicker Archaeomancer plus one of your other dungeon permanents, and then Radiant Solar is just a huge combo extender and an outlet, and also pairs well with Felidar Guardian and Restoration Angel. These two can flicker each other back and forth forever. With Radiant Solar on the battlefield, you'll cause infinite dungeon triggers and close out the game. The way you close out the games with the dungeons once you find your infinite combos is you'll either be going through the Undercity through the trap room on the left side of the dungeon to start hitting your opponents for 5 or 10 points at a time with Hama out, and then Lost Mines of Fendelver, you have the Dark Pool. You can also go into the Tomb of Annihilation, though this is probably the worst dungeon. It's sort of group slug. It causes you to also lose life. And then Dungeon of the Mad Mage is kind of odd. If you have like a bazillion dungeon triggers on the stack, Usually going through the Dungeon of the Mad Mage is not a bad idea. You tend to be able to find all the pieces you need to win and cheat them all into play off of like Mad Wizard's Lair because you're going to be scrying so much. You're going to hit everything you need. So Dungeon of the Mad Mage sometimes is just almost guaranteed wins, but usually the Undercity is enough to get you there. And once you have like near infinite dungeons or tons of dungeons, you no longer need your permanents. You need to find like a flicker spell. You can still go scry 2, go to the arena, go to some targets, and then start drawing cards by going through the archives to try to find your other bits. As far as sorceries go, we're running 2 board wipes, Austere Command and a Time Wipe. Austere Command's budget, very versatile. It's sort of like the baby brother version of Farewell. And then Time Wipe is just really good in our colors, helps us bounce something to our hand, potentially a creature like Wipe Bloom Adventure or something that can take the initiative again, or our commander if we want to avoid our commander attacks. Flicker lets us flicker some of our artifacts, which a lot of the other types of effects that are flicker-like don't do. So Saravox Tome and Trailblazer's Torch can be flickered with this. And then as far as instants, we're running 20. This deck is highly interactive. We tend to want to hold up our flicker effects for our opponent's turns and be able to use them reactively and generate more advantage that way. Notably, Eerie Interlude and Lazel's Acrobatics flicker our entire board, and that can be absolutely nutty in this list. Lazel's Acrobatics, especially if you're rolling above a 10, just kind of gets nuts and the stat gets crazy. Cosmic Intervention is just amazing board wipe protection and does the same thing. In a lot of cases where we either get board wiped or we block a huge attack with a lot of our creatures, they would all die, but they'll come back in the end step, and we tend to end up in a better place than we were at the beginning of that combat step or before that board wipe resolved in the first place. So these are both really good. And we just run a couple of counter spells and some good removal, and a pseudo counter spell in the form of Reprieve. Artifacts, we don't have green, so we're going to ramp this way. Saravox Tome of note is a ramp piece that helps us also take the initiative. There's a couple combos that revolve around the use of Saravox Tome as well, and it lets us spin random stuff off the top of our deck if we absolutely have to try to keep going or to find outs to things. So it's very useful in this list. Teleportation Circle is better than Conjurer's Closet here. It's probably the most expensive card in the list and is certainly cuttable, but it can also flicker our artifacts and is a big play extender. And if the game goes long, this generates tons and tons of advantage. And then Flies just really take the initiative back with an evasive creature and get a free dungeon trigger on that hit as well. Can be absolutely nuts for only 1 mana. We're running 35 lands and then 1 MDFC in the form of Sujiri Shelter, which is the protection piece and usually helps protect our combo pieces. But Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Glacial Fortress, Nimbus Maze, Port Town, and Prairie Stream are the only things that really need to serve as duels. We're only in 2 colors. We tend to get basics into our hand very easily, and a lot of our stuff, while high costed, is only like 1 colored pip, like Feywild Caretaker, Goliath Paladin, etc. So we tend to not have issues with color fixing. So this line count tends to be fine. And then as far as non-budget considerations, if you want to throw the Monarchy into this list, these are probably your 2 best bets. Palace Jailer lets you exile target creature opponent controls until they become an opponent becomes the Monarch. Helps get rid of a problem permanent. As your Fleet Admiral, you take the Monarch, and if your opponent has the Monarch, you can just swing this at them, and they'll tend to also have the initiative if they have the Monarch. So this helps you get both those things back, which can be very clutch. Lord of the Third Path is like a sort of repeatable Cathar commando in the list, and potentially helps you draw cards. And then Preston and Elish Norn are absolutely busted in the list, though also added the complexity. Elish Norn in particular is really, really spicy, though definitely not a budget include. Doomscar, Farewell, Winds of Abandoned are good alternative board wipes, along with Cyclonic Rift if you've got the budget. You can also increase your counterspell package and just run some other better things in the format. Dovin's Veto is great in our colors, and then things like Mana Drain, while stupid expensive, a lot of our stuff is 4, 5, 6 mana with a lot of colorless in its cost, so we can always use that. And Mystical Tutor is handy for just getting whatever powerful instant or sorcery out of our library into our hand, or at least on the top of our deck where we're going to draw it. And then Displace, if you want to run more things like Ghostly Flicker, Displace is really good, although you may not always have the necessary creatures to displace with, whereas Ghostly Flicker is pretty much always online, and I haven't felt the need for a Displace, to be honest. But that's the list. We'll go over some combos next. All right, we're going to get into the combo portion of the video, though notably I want to point out a lot of this is also in the primer. This is just more of a walkthrough. The primer is very robust and explains a lot more about the deck in greater detail, so please check that out. So we'll start off with the Abdul Adrian combo. Let's say we have 6 mana here. Felidar Guardian's already in play, and some kind of dungeon permanent. In this case, it's our Veteran Dungeoneer. So we start off by casting or getting into play off a Throne of the 3 trigger our Abdul Adrian. We will exile Felidar Guardian and our dungeon permanent. Under this, we will generate 2 soldier tokens. In the process, we get 1 for each thing we exile. Now, we're going to use our last mana that we have up to cast something like a Cloud Shift here. We will exile Abdul Adrian, and the game treats all of these permanents as coming into play at the same time. As it does, we get to order the triggers on the stack. So the way I'm going to order them is I'm going to order them like so. I'm going to venture into the dungeon. I'm going to have Abdul Adrian trigger, and then I have the Felidar Guardian pointed at Abdul. So we'll go into the dungeon. We will exile these 2 permanents under Abdul, and then the Felidar Guardian will trigger Flickering Abdul, and they all come back into play at the same time, and this process repeats. Notably, this lets us go through infinite dungeons or take the initiative infinite amount of times. We can also flicker our mana rocks here. It's just any non-land permanent, so we can actually go up in mana through this, and sometimes you're just doing this for value. And even if you don't have a dungeon permanent, sometimes you can just do this, make infinite 1/1 tokens, and then close out the game the next turn with a massive attack. This next one is the Archaeomancer Peregrine Drake Ghostly Flicker combo. The way this works is we will use, and I have this set up here with 4 lands to show you that this is also possible. We will cast our Peregrine Drake. Peregrine Drake's enter the battlefield trigger causes us to untap up to 5 lands. In this case, we'll just do 4. As long as we have 4 or more, this is a mana positive loop. From here, we will pay 3 mana, including at least 1 blue. We'll cast Ghostly Flicker. We'll target Peregrine Drake and our Archaeomancer. Archaeomancer will re-enter the battlefield and put the Ghostly Flicker from our graveyard back into our hand. Peregrine Drake will untap up to 5 lands again. In response to the Peregrine Drake trigger, we will tap our lands to float mana and then untap all these lands. We have now gone through this loop, and we are up 1 mana that's either white or blue. We can do this infinite times to generate infinite mana of our colors. Once we have infinite mana of our colors, we can cast Ghostly Flicker targeting Archaeomancer plus Veteran Dungeoneer or any of our dungeon permanents, and then constantly get this back to our hand, cast it an infinite number of times, causing infinite dungeon triggers off of the other permanent. This next one's very straightforward. Radiant Solar causes additional dungeon triggers every time a non-token creature enters the battlefield. So if we have one or the other Restoration Angel or Felidar Guardian in play, we cast the other, or they're both in play, and we flicker one, I can say put Restoration Angel into the battlefield, or onto the battlefield. Its ATB will target Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian will flicker, or first of all, this entering the battlefield will cause a dungeon trigger, which I can let resolve. This will flicker Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian will re-enter, trigger a dungeon, which I can let resolve. And then I'll have this trigger target Restoration Angel. These will go back and forth forever. I can stack the dungeon trigger on top of the flickers and go through the dungeons infinitely. And notably, this combo doesn't need our commander. So this next combo is a little more involved, requires more pieces, though you may find yourself in these scenarios, and it's good to know that this also will win you the game. Cerebrix Tome, Archaeomancer, plus a Radiant Solar, and Hama Pashar in play. So what we'll do is, let's say we have the initiative, or in this case, let's say we don't. We'll tap this for just 1 colorless. We'll tap this for a blue, we'll tap for a white, we'll cast our Ghostly Flicker. We will flicker our Cerevox Tome and our Archaeomancer. The Archaeomancer can get Ghostly Flicker back to our hand. We'll have an initiative trigger and a dungeon trigger off of this through Radiant Solar, seeing the Archaeomancer re-enter. We'll organize them so that we'll go through the dungeons instead of the initiative in this case. We will go into the Lost Mines of Phandelver for scrying 1 and then creating treasure tokens. So we'll create 2 treasure tokens. Now, notably, we now have the initiative again. So this is tapping for 2 colorless mana. So what we'll do is we'll tap this for 2 colorless. We'll burn 1 of our treasures and recast the Ghostly Flicker, flickering these permanents, doing the whole thing over again. We'll drain everybody for 2, and then we'll draw 2 cards. We can then repeat this process 1 more time, getting 2 more triggers. And flickering these 2 permanents, we'll scry some more. We'll create these tokens again and be able to continue the process. And as we go, we're drawing cards and burning our opponents to the dark pool. As long as we have more cards in our library than our opponents have life, we are going to win the game off of this. And in a similar vein to the last combo, this involves Felidar Guardian, Archaeomancer, Radiant Solar with Hama Pashar in play. So what we'll do is we'll tap for 1, we'll cast our Cloud Shift, we'll target Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian's ETB will trigger Radiant Solar to make us go into a dungeon. We'll start the Lost Mines of Phandelver, scrying 1. Felidar Guardian will trigger Flicker Archaeomancer. We'll get an ETB here, getting Cloud Shift back to our hand, and also getting another dungeon. We'll make 2 treasure tokens. Notably, even if we're tapped out at this point, if I say start casting Cloud Shift or Essence Flux off of our treasures, targeting Felidar Guardian, and then Felidar Guardian targeting Archaeomancer, we'll constantly be generating treasures through the loop that we can use to recycle and cast the Cloud Shift over and over again. This can be Cloud Shift or the Essence Flux, and this can also be Restoration Angel and serve the same effect, but this also wins you the game. Next, I want to talk about some opening hands, what you might want to keep with this deck, what you might want to pitch, and then potentially let's try to fishbowl a little bit and see if we can get a turn 6 win. So in this case, we have tons and tons of ramp. We've got a land we can play immediately, into a Soul Ring, into an Arcane Signet. This, in a lot of other games, seems really good, but we got to remember our commander is a very good advantage engine, but is not an outlet for our mana. In this case, you're entirely reliant on drawing useful things off the top of your library, and I doubt you're going to find them. And I think this hand is actually too risky to keep, despite a turn 1 Soul Ring. So do not keep this hand. This sort of hand is an interesting place to be in. While we don't have any of our dungeon creatures, we do have plays on turns 2, 3, and 4 respectively that are all pretty good and might help us draw or get us into our strategy and our overall game plan. This is definitely not the worst keep, and we're also color fixed here, but we can certainly do better. This hand is interesting. We have 3 lands. We have a very good initiative creature. We can at least stick Hama Pashar on turn 3. Opt might help us find our 4th land to stick the Dungeoneer as well as other stuff. And on turn 5, we can Peregrine Drake into a Teleportation Circle. Is it the fastest hand? No. Does it get our strategy online quickly? Yes. And Season Under Year is also very, very good at allowing us to take the initiative back from our opponents because it can give creatures protection from other creatures, making our stuff unblockable effectively and swinging in and taking the initiative back. So I assume this would probably develop into a very early win. All right, we shuffled up. We're going to give this hand a go. So let's start off by drawing for turn. We'll play an island. We will tap it for a blue. We'll cast our Opt immediately. We'll scry. It's a plains. We will put that on the bottom of our library. We will draw an island. Great. And we'll ship the turn. On our following turn, let's just play the island. We got a Cosmic Intervention, so we can actually foretell this. I'll turn it over, and we'll just know that we have that there. Turn 3, we'll draw for turn. Let's play the Port Town, revealing one of the islands that we drew before, and we'll cast Hama Pashar. Pass. Our following turn, let's play another one of our lands, and we will play Aarakocra Sneak. we will venture into the Undercity. We will search our library for some basic lands. So let's just grab these 2 plains and put them into our hand. We are at 7 cards in hand, don't need to discard anything. Pass the turn. Now, it's unclear whether or not we maintain the initiative in our upkeep, though notably, we have a 3 toughness blocker and a 4 toughness flying blocker in the form of Aarakocra Sneak. Let's assume that we do keep the initiative. So going into this next turn, let's scry 2 twice. Let's keep the Momentary Blink on top for now. We'll put that in the bottom. Our second set of scry is another plains. Put that on the bottom as well. Let's draw this Momentary Blink. We will play a land for turn. Let's just play our Glacial Fortress. And let's attack our opponents for 1 in the air because we can. We will follow that up with a Felidar Guardian. We will flicker the Aarakocra Sneak. It is now untapped again, and we will go into the next room of the Undercity, generating 2 treasures. We have our 2 treasures. We are now able to hold up both the Momentary Blink and our Foretelled Cosmic Intervention this way. We'll pass the turn. In our opponent's end step, say we don't have the initiative, right? They've hit us, we no longer have it. The opponent right before us, in their end step, we will cast the Momentary Blink using one of our treasures. We'll flicker the Aarakocra Sneak, taking the initiative. We will make those skeleton tokens. They don't pop up here either, but we'll have 2 skeleton tokens. And Momentary Blink will go to the graveyard and it has flashback for later. We will go to our turn, and in our upkeep, the Throne of the Dead 3 will trigger. When we have the initiative in our upkeep, we advance into the next room, so we'll reveal the top 10 cards of our library. We're looking for creatures here, so we've gotten quite a few so far. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. These are options here. Notably, in this case, I think I just want to generate as much advantage as possible. I want to go back into the initiative dungeons, and I will put 2 basic lands into my hand as I restart the initiative dungeon. So we will grab a plains and an island into our hand, and then we'll do the next Throne of the Dead 3 trigger. So once again, we see a Nadar, there's a Fairy Seer, an OG the Exquisite Blade, Veteran Dungeoneer, Abdel Adrian, Cloister Gargoyle, an island, Trailblazer's Torch, and a Peregrine Drake. We're going to take Abdel. And this is in our upkeep. So these will go back in and get shuffled. Abdel will re-enter will not re-enter, but it will enter the battlefield. And under it, let's exile the White Plume Adventurer and the Felidar Guardian. We'll go to our draw step. We'll draw for turn. It's a plains. We'll play a land for turn. And at this point, all we need to do is flash back the Momentary Blink in our graveyard, targeting Abdel, to cause that flicker combo and win the game. And that is how you do a turn 6 win with Hama Pashar. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed the deck. It can be a little complicated to play. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comment section of this video or on Moxfield. I check the deck list regularly and update it relatively regularly. The primer is also full of a lot of information. Some of it's the same information, but there's also some additional context about the deck and some guidelines about how to run it. But yeah, in any case, I hope you guys enjoy the deck, have a lot of fun exploring the dungeons, and maybe I'll see you guys in future deck techs. Thanks.